I had just lost my mother to cancer when I put up a small memorial wreath on my door. Hours later, I found it torn down, shredded, and left in pieces across my front lawn. I stared in shock as my neighbor stood across the street filming me on his phone, laughing. When I choked out, "Why would you do this?" he shouted back. "Your sad little life is dragging down the street. Enough mourning already!" I turned and walked inside, leaving my mother's memory scattered in the dirt. I sat in the living room that night, the wreath pieces still outside, my heart like a cold stone in my chest. I didn't move for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't even turn the lights on. I just sat there, feeling the silence. When the clock hit midnight, I finally stood up. My mom always told me, "Don't fight dirty unless they make you." Craig had made me. The first thing I did was pull out a yellow notepad and a pen. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. No wild moves. No blow-ups. Just steady pressure, like a slow leak that nobody notices until the house falls down. I already knew the basics. Craig lived alone. His wife left him a few years ago, took the kids, moved out of state. He worked odd jobs, handyman stuff, nothing steady. I'd seen him leave in an old pickup most mornings around 7 a.m. I spent the next week quietly watching him. I parked my car a little farther down the street so he wouldn't notice me behind my front windows. I wrote down when he left, when he came back, what deliveries showed up at his house. I even figured out that he had a side hustle fixing ATVs in his garage, cash under the table. Probably not reporting a dime of it. The first thing I did was file a quiet, anonymous complaint with the city about unlicensed commercial work being done out of his home. Fort Worth is strict about that kind of thing. They sent an inspector 2 weeks later. Craig lost it. I watched from behind my blinds as he screamed at the city worker in his driveway, red in the face, waving his arms around. The inspector stayed calm, handed him a citation, and left. Craig kicked the garbage can halfway across his lawn. Craig had an ad up on Craigslist for his ATV repairs. I used a throwaway email to send a tip to his biggest customers, pretending to be a concerned neighbor. I wrote that Craig's work wasn't insured, that if something went wrong, they could be on the hook. Within days, the steady line of pickups and trailers stopped showing up at his house. I started small. Every few nights, when it was dark, I'd walk over and move his trash cans just a few feet down the road. Sometimes I left a different street's newspaper in his yard. Other times I just pulled his mailbox door open and left it hanging. Stupid tiny things. Things you couldn't prove. But I could see it working. Craig got jumpy. He installed a cheap security camera, but it barely worked. I kept my hoodie up, stayed in the shadows. Every time he came outside, he looked around like he expected someone to jump him. Good. Craig had a habit of letting his dog crap in other people's yards. He never cleaned it up. People hated it, but nobody ever said anything to his face. One morning, real early, I scooped up 3 piles of his dog's crap with a shovel and dumped it right across his front porch. Right where he'd step in it when he opened the door. He came out half asleep, stepped in it, and nearly fell over. I heard his roaring cuss words from my living room. The cherry on top? I made sure the neighborhood Facebook page had an anonymous post about someone walking their dog without cleaning up, pointing fingers at Craig's house directly. Pictures included. Craig lived for his truck. A rusty old Ford that roared louder than it ran. It was his baby. He polished it more than he cleaned his house. I didn't touch the truck directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I went lower. I watched and waited until one night I saw him get drunk, stumbling around his porch. He loved beer a little too much. Once he passed out in his chair, snoring like a busted chainsaw. I called in an anonymous tip to the police about a man passed out drunk in a running vehicle on our street. Said I was worried he was trying to drive home. 10 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up. I watched from my window, heart hammering. Craig tried to argue, but he was so drunk they cuffed him. Driving drunk or not, public intoxication is still a charge here. They towed his truck. He spent the night in county jail. The next morning, he trudged up his driveway, looking 10 years older. No swagger. No smirk. No phone out, filming his neighbors. Just a broken man staring at his feet. After Craig's arrest, the street changed. The other neighbors, who used to mostly ignore each other, suddenly started talking. And they weren't whispering anymore. Word spread fast. I could hear them on the sidewalks and see the posts on Facebook. People shared stories about the way Craig screamed at kids who rode their bikes too close to his lawn, how he refused to move his junk trailer when someone needed extra street parking, how he threatened to take matters into his own hands over a Halloween decoration he didn't like. He had built himself a prison, and now everyone was turning the key. But I wasn't done. Not yet. About a week after he got his truck out of impound, I noticed something odd. I found a dead squirrel stuffed in my mailbox one morning. It stank. Flies already buzzing. No note, just a message clear as day. Craig was sending warnings. I stayed cool. I bagged it up, threw it in the trash, and didn't say a word. If he wanted a war, he was swinging blind. I still had more to lose, and more to take from him. I wasn't the only one digging. Turns out a neighbor 2 doors down, Mr. Salinas, a retired cop, had been quietly gathering dirt too. One evening, I saw him out watering his lawn and decided to talk to him. I walked over, made small talk, then asked real casual, "You ever have problems with Craig?" Mr. Salinas gave a short laugh. "Problems? That man's got a sealed record thicker than a Bible. Assault charges, unpaid fines, some other stuff I can't even talk about. I keep my distance." Assault charges. That explained the way Craig always got too close when he was angry. The way he sneered like he wanted you to swing first. I thanked Mr. Salinas and walked back home, mind racing. If Craig had that kind of history, maybe it was time the rest of the neighborhood knew. I started small. A few old court records were public online, the ones not sealed. I printed them out and slid them, anonymous and quiet, into a few mailboxes on the street. Not all at once. One here, one there. Always late at night. Then I created a fake Facebook account and joined the local community page. Posted screenshots. "Just concerned about our neighborhood's safety," I wrote. The blowback was nuclear. People started organizing neighborhood watch meetings. Talking about Craig directly. Someone even spray-painted "Thug" on the side of his trash bin one night. He tried to yell. He tried to threaten. He stood in his driveway a few times, shouting at people as they walked past, but nobody bit. They just kept walking. Turning their heads. Ignoring him. Craig was unraveling. I found out Craig had a lien on his house. Unpaid taxes. Years of them. It wasn't public yet, not enough to trigger foreclosure, but it was close. I made an anonymous call to the county office and asked how to report property maintenance violations. Craig's house had a rotting fence, tall grass, broken windows. They thanked me. Within a week, a different city department showed up, clipboard in hand. Fines stacked. Craig's hands were tied. He couldn't fix the problems because he was broke. He couldn't sell the house fast because of the liens. And if he stayed? More fines. More embarrassment. I had boxed him in. No way out. One morning, early, I watched from my window as Craig loaded up his truck with garbage bags and old furniture. He didn't look around. Didn't slam doors. Just packed, quiet and defeated. For sale by owner. Sign showed up the next day, handwritten, tilted in the dirt. He was leaving. But I wasn't finished yet. Craig might have been packing up to leave, but part of me knew he wouldn't go quietly. Guys like him didn't know how to lose. Not really. A few nights after the for sale sign went up, I caught movement on my security camera, the real one, hidden behind a gutter downspout. Craig was standing at the edge of my driveway, drunk again, swaying on his feet. He bent down and did something to my front tire. Then he staggered back to his side of the street like nothing happened. When I went outside the next morning, my driver's side tire was flat. I found a small puncture near the tread. Not random. Deliberate. He wanted to get one last shot in before he left. Maybe cause a crash. Maybe just piss me off. It didn't work. I patched the tire, smiled into the morning sun, and moved forward with my final play. A few nights later, I waited until I saw Craig leave, probably to a bar or some other dive he still wasn't banned from. I slipped over to his front porch and dropped a letter into his rusty mailbox. No return address. Inside? A fake but official-looking notice warning him that the county was going to move to seize his property for unpaid taxes, unless he paid everything immediately. I knew he couldn't. And more importantly, I knew he wouldn't read carefully enough to realize it wasn't real. Sure enough, the next morning, I watched him lose it. He stood in the front yard, on the phone, screaming at some poor county worker. His face turned purple. His hand waved the fake notice around in the air. Within 2 days, he yanked the "for sale" sign out of the ground, dumped it behind his shed, and put the whole house up with a real realtor. Dirt cheap. Desperate. Word got out, and now buyers smelled blood. They offered way under asking price. Craig had no choice. He took a lowball offer. Barely enough to clear his debts. No profit. No fresh start. His dog? Animal Control picked it up one afternoon, anonymous tip, about a loose, aggressive dog. They found it roaming because Craig left the gate open. Took him 3 weeks and hundreds of dollars in fines to get it back. His job? I found out where he was picking up some side work, a landscaping company outside town. Another anonymous call to the owner, warning about Craig's criminal background and dangerous temper. They dropped him within the week. His pride? Gone. Nobody waved to him. Nobody invited him to the annual street party. He might as well have been a ghost. The day Craig finally drove away, truck bed overloaded, bumper dragging, I stood behind my front window again. I held the new wreath in my hands. Fresh, bright. Real flowers this time. I watched him disappear down the road without a single glance back. And this time, when I hung the wreath on my door, nobody tore it down. Nobody dared. For a few weeks after Craig left, the street felt lighter. Calmer. People even started waving to each other again. I should have felt at peace. I should have been proud. But something inside me stayed heavy. Because the truth is, I hadn't just defended my mother's memory. I hadn't just protected the street. I'd enjoyed tearing Craig apart. Maybe too much. The real trouble started 2 months later. One morning, I got a knock at my door. When I opened it, a man in a dark jacket stood there, badge hanging from his belt. "Mr. Morrow?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, throat dry. "I'm Detective Henley with the Fort Worth Police. Mind if we asked you a few questions about your former neighbor, Craig Densmore?" I nodded, stepping back to let him in. My hands shook behind my back. Henley pulled out a small notebook. "We've had some anonymous complaints. About harassment. About possible tampering with private property. About intimidation." Craig filed the report before he left town. I felt my mouth go dry. He didn't have proof. Henley went on. "But we're following up on all reports involving neighborhood disputes. Especially ones that could turn into civil cases." Civil cases. Lawsuits. Money I didn't have. I kept my face blank, played dumb. I told him Craig had always been unstable, that lots of neighbors had problems with him. Which was true. But the detective's eyes stayed sharp, like he could smell the lies in the room. When he left, my shirt was soaked through with sweat. I sat down hard on the couch, breathing fast. The next few weeks were a nightmare. I couldn't sleep. I jumped every time a car slowed down near the house. I kept thinking, had I pushed it too far? The mailbox. The fake notices. The harassment. If someone really wanted to dig deep, they could probably tie a few things back to me. Craig was gone, but he had fired a shot over his shoulder before he left. In the middle of all that stress, my job performance slipped. Badly. I work remote, IT stuff mostly. Simple enough. But when you can't think straight, when you're watching the windows instead of your laptop, you miss things. Deadlines. Emails. After one too many warnings, my manager let me go. No big scene. No second chances. Just an email. We appreciate your work, but we're moving in a different direction. Gone. Just like that. Money got tight. Bills piled up. I tried to fight the growing panic. Tried to tell myself it would pass. But late at night, when the house was dark and the only sound was the creaking of the old floorboards, I would sit in the living room and stare at the front door. The same door where the first wreath had hung. The same door where this whole thing had started. And I would think about my mom's voice, somewhere deep inside me. Always leave a place better than you found it. Had I? Or had I just traded one kind of rot for another? The final hit came one evening when I checked the mail. A thick, heavy envelope. Inside, a formal letter. Craig was suing me. Harassment. Defamation. Emotional distress. Property damage. Even if I fought it and won, it would cost me thousands just to defend myself. Money I didn't have. Money I couldn't borrow. The old saying came back to me then, bitter and sharp. When you dig a grave for your enemy, dig two. I lost the case. Not fully. The court didn't believe everything Craig claimed, but enough to crush me. I had to pay a settlement. Had to sell the house my mom raised me in. Had to pack up the wreaths, the memories, the last pieces of her life, and leave Fort Worth behind. As I drove away from that house for the last time, I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. Because deep down, I knew I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had poisoned the ground I was trying to protect. And in the end, I paid the price too. Maybe even more than Craig did.